I went to the mechanic thinking the worst thing I'd hear that day was a number with too many zeros. Instead, he wiped his hands on a rag, looked me straight in the eye and said, "Yeah, your car's got a problem. But that's not the only thing I'm noticing." His name was Aaron. I remember that because it felt important the second he said it. Like my brain flagged it and went, "Store this for later." He was leaning against the open hood of my car, grease on his forearms, dark hair pulled back messily, eyes way too calm for someone about to ruin my paycheck. I laughed, because that's what you do when someone says something that sounds like a joke but lands a little too close to the truth. "Pretty sure I didn't bring myself in for diagnostics," I said. Aaron didn't smile right away. He just tilted his head, studying me the same way he'd been studying the engine a moment before, like he was listening for a noise I didn't know I was making. "I'm Jesse," I added, mostly to fill the silence. "Yeah," he said. "I know. That should have been the first red flag." I hadn't told him my name yet. I'd brought the car in because it had been making this low, uneven knocking sound every time I slowed down. Not loud, just enough to make my stomach tighten every red light. I was already on edge before I even walked into the garage. Bad week at work, bad sleep, that familiar heavy feeling I pretended not to notice anymore. Aaron stepped back from the car and nodded toward the waiting area. "Give me a few minutes. You can hang out inside if you want." "I'm good," I said. "I'll stay." I don't know why. Maybe it was the way he moved, confident but unhurried. Maybe it was the fact that being near him felt distracting in a way that was relieving, like my brain finally shut up for once. He went back under the hood. Tools clinked. The garage smelled like oil and warm metal. I leaned against the wall, scrolling my phone without really seeing anything. After a minute, Aaron spoke again. "So," he said casually, "how long's it been making that sound?" "Couple weeks. And you just ignored it?" I shrugged. "I always do." That made him glance up. "Not at the engine. At me." "Yeah," he said slowly. I figured. Something about the way he said it made my chest tighten. "You figured what?" He straightened fully this time, setting the tool down. His hands were still dirty, knuckles scraped like he worked with things that fought back. "That you're the type who waits until something's about to completely fall apart before you let anyone look at it." I opened my mouth to argue, then closed it, because he wasn't wrong and we both knew it. Aaron exhaled through his nose, not unkindly. "Relax. I'm not judging. Just seen it a lot. With cars," I said. "With people," he corrected. There was a beat of silence between us. The kind that stretches just long enough to become something else. He picked the rag back up, wiped his hands again even though they were already clean. "Your brakes are worn unevenly," he said, back to business. "One side's compensating for the other. If you keep driving it like this, you're gonna feel it everywhere." I nodded. "Sounds about right." He looked at me again, eyebrow raised. "You talking about the car?" he said. "Or yourself?" I laughed again, but this time it came out a little thinner. "Is this part of the service?" I asked, because I don't remember checking the unexpected emotional assessment box. Aaron finally smiled. Not wide, not playful, just enough to let me know he knew exactly what he was doing. "No," he said, "that part's free." And standing there in that garage, with my car taken apart and his eyes on me like he could hear things I'd been trying not to, I had the strange, uncomfortable thought. I hadn't come in just because something was wrong with my car. I'd come in because, somehow, part of me was already breaking down and Aaron had noticed before I did. I told myself I was imagining it. The looks, the pauses, the way Aaron seemed a little too aware of me standing there, like my presence had weight. Mechanics flirt sometimes, right? Or at least they joke. This was probably just that some confident guy who knew how to read people and liked pushing buttons. Still, when he slid out from under the hood again and asked, "You got somewhere to be?" my answer came out faster than I expected. "No." He nodded like that confirmed something. "Good. This'll take a bit." I followed him inside the garage office without thinking, past the coffee machine that probably hadn't been cleaned since Obama was president. He pulled up the estimate on the computer, turning the screen slightly toward me. "It's fixable," he said. "Not cheap, but not catastrophic either." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Story of my life. That earned me a quiet chuckle. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, studying me again, not like a customer this time, but like someone deciding whether to say something risky. You always talk like that? He asked. Like what? Like you're bracing for impact. I frowned. You say that to everyone? No, he said. Just you. There it was again. That feeling. Like the room had tilted a couple degrees off level. I shrugged, trying to play it off. Guess I've learned not to expect things to go smoothly. Aaron's gaze softened, just a little. Yeah, he said. I get that. He printed the estimate, slid it across the desk. Our fingers brushed for half a second when I took it. Static. Real or imagined, I couldn't tell, but my pulse jumped anyway. I can have it ready by tomorrow afternoon, he said. You'll need a ride? I hesitated. Ubering home felt anticlimactic somehow. I'll manage. He tilted his head. You sure? Yeah. Another pause. Longer this time. All right, he said slowly. But if you change your mind, I'm around. I left the garage feeling unsettled in a way I couldn't explain. It wasn't attraction exactly, not just that. It was more like recognition. Like he'd seen something in me I'd spent years keeping quiet. That night I barely slept. The next day dragged. I checked my phone more times than I wanted to admit, half expecting a message that had no reason to exist. When Aaron finally called to say the car was ready, my stomach flipped like I was heading into an exam I hadn't studied for. When I got there, he was already waiting outside, leaning against my car. Clean shirt this time, still grease under his nails. So, I asked, forcing casual. Did it survive? Barely, he said. Just like its owner. I rolled my eyes. You really don't know when to stop, do you? Nope. He handed me the keys, our fingers brushing again. This time neither of us pulled away immediately. It was subtle, easy to miss, but it was there. Before I could say anything, he cleared his throat. Hey, Jesse? Yeah. He hesitated. And for the first time since I'd met him, he looked unsure. Look, this might be weird, he said. And if it is, just say so. But I was gonna grab a drink after my shift. Thought maybe you'd want to join. My heart thudded hard enough that I was sure he could hear it. A drink. That was all. Normal. Harmless. But the way he was watching me told me he knew it wouldn't stay that simple. I should probably get home, I said automatically. He nodded, already stepping back. Yeah, no worries. The disappointment on his face was quick, controlled but real. And that's when I realized something that scared me more than the bill, more than the car breaking down. I didn't want to walk away. Actually, I said, before I could overthink it, one drink's fine. Aaron's smile this time was different. Not confident. Not teasing. Relieved. Cool, he said. I get off at 7. As I drove away, car running smoother than it had in weeks, I couldn't stop thinking the same thought over and over. This wasn't about the car anymore. And whatever Aaron had seen in me yesterday, he was about to see a lot more. I showed up 10 minutes early and sat in my car like an idiot, engine off, hands on the wheel, telling myself I could still leave. 7 o'clock came and went. Then 7:02. I watched the garage door roll up, Aaron stepping out with his jacket slung over his shoulder. When he spotted my car, his face shifted surprise first, then something warmer, like he hadn't been sure I'd actually come. That alone made staying worth it. Hey, he said when I got out. You didn't bail. Thought about it, I admitted. Yeah. Still here, though. He smiled at that, the kind that lingered a second longer than necessary. Bar's a couple blocks down. You want to walk or dash? Walking's fine. So, Aaron said eventually, what do you do when you're not neglecting your car? I laughed. Office job. Data stuff. Boring enough that people stop asking follow-up questions. Do you like it? I hesitated. It pays. He nodded slowly. That's not an answer. I glanced at him. You always this annoying? Only when I'm interested. That landed harder than I expected. Interested in what? He didn't answer right away. The bar came into view, low lights, warm windows. He held the door open for me, his hand brushing my back as I passed. Intentional. No pretending otherwise. Inside, it was loud enough to give us cover. We grabbed stools at the bar, ordered beers. For a few minutes we talked about nothing: music, bad customers, the guy at the end of the bar who was definitely on a first date that wasn't going well. And then Aaron said, casually, "You always this guarded?" I froze, bottle halfway to my mouth. What? He didn't look at me this time. Just watched the bartender wipe down the counter. You deflect. Joke. Keep things surface level. I'm not saying it's bad. Just noticeable. I exhaled slowly. You really don't miss much, do you? Nope. Hazard of the job, I said. He finally looked at me then. That's not what I meant. I felt something loosen in my chest. Or maybe tighten. Hard to tell. Why are you here, Jesse? He asked quietly. I could have given him an easy answer. Because you asked. Because I wanted a drink. Instead, I said the truth before I could stop myself. Because you saw me yesterday, I said. And I don't know how, but you did. Aaron didn't smile. Didn't joke. He just nodded, like that confirmed something for him too. Yeah, he said. You ever get tired of being the one who's holding everything together? He asked. The question hit low and deep. I stared at my beer, throat tight. All the time. He leaned in slightly. You don't have to tonight. I looked up at him. Really looked. The confidence was still there, but so was something softer underneath it. Care. Maybe even caution. I'm not asking you to be anything you're not, he added. Just be here. And suddenly I wasn't thinking about tomorrow or work or responsibility or the careful version of myself I usually hid behind. I nodded. I'm here. Aaron's smile this time wasn't teasing or cocky. It was genuine. I was married once, Aaron said suddenly. That surprised me. Yeah. Couple years ago. He shrugged. Didn't end badly. Just ended. I waited. He continued. I spent a long time trying to be what was expected. Turns out I'm not great at pretending. Something in his tone told me this wasn't just about marriage. I nodded. Yeah, I get that. He glanced at me. You do. I'm really good at being the version of myself people don't question. I said. He said quietly. You don't seem exhausting to me. My chest tightened. I swallowed. You've known me. What? 2 days. Long enough. The city hummed around us, unaware of the small, private shift happening on that sidewalk. So, he said, hands in his jacket pockets, you want to keep talking? Or do you want to pretend this was just a drink? I looked at him. Really looked. No pretending, I said. He nodded once. My place is closer. The walk there felt different. Inside, the place smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil. Suited him. We stood awkwardly for a moment. The quiet suddenly heavy. That was enough. His arms wrapped around me then, solid and grounding, and for the first time in a long time I didn't feel like I was holding myself together by force. I felt held. And as we stood there in the quiet of his apartment, breathing each other in, I knew this wasn't a detour or a mistake. It was the beginning of something I hadn't let myself want. We didn't rush. That surprised me too. Aaron pulled back first, just enough to look at me, like he was checking whether I was still there with him or already slipping back into my head. You want to sit? He asked. Yeah. We ended up on the couch. The TV stayed off. The quiet felt intentional now, not awkward. I traced the seam of my glass with my thumb. You always this careful? He smiled faintly. Only when something matters. I told him about the constant pressure I felt to be fine. To be the dependable one. The one who didn't need help. Sounds lonely, he said gently. It is, I admitted. Or was. Most of the time. His arm slid around me then. Slow. Easy. I leaned into it without thinking, my head resting against his shoulder like it belonged there. You don't have to be the strong one here, he said. Not with me. I laughed softly. You barely know me. I know enough to see when someone's tired, he replied. That did it. Stay? He asked. Not an expectation. An invitation. Yeah, I said. I want to. He showed me the spare room, but when we stopped in the doorway he hesitated. You sure? I smiled. I'm sure. Morning came quietly. No alarm. No panic. just soft light creeping in through the blinds and the steady warmth behind me. Aaron was still asleep. We didn't talk much at first. Coffee happened. Real mugs, not paper cups. He moved around the kitchen barefoot and relaxed. None of the guarded confidence from the garage. Just Aaron. A man in his own space. "You're quiet," he said eventually. "Just thinking. That usually dangerous for you?" I snorted. "Extremely." He leaned against the counter across from me. "You okay?" I hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just not used to waking up without that what did I do feeling." "Me neither," he admitted. "But I don't have it." That mattered more than I expected. We didn't label anything, didn't make plans beyond the day. But when I left, keys in hand, Aaron stopped me at the door. "Hey," he said, "you don't owe me anything. Just don't disappear." I met his eyes. "I won't." And I meant it. The days that followed felt different. Not dramatic, not intense, just steadier. Texts that didn't feel forced. Dinners that didn't feel like auditions. Silences that didn't need filling. One night, a week later, we were back at the garage. My car was fine now and smoother than it had in years. I watched Aaron work, familiar with the rhythm of him. "You know," I said, leaning against the doorway, "you never did tell me what else you noticed that first day." He glanced up. "Besides the brakes?" "Yeah." He wiped his hands, stepped closer. "I noticed someone who'd been compensating for a long time, carrying weight that wasn't his, waiting for permission to stop. And," I asked quietly, "and I noticed you didn't need fixing," he said. "Just balance." I swallowed. Funny thing was, for the first time I believed it. I didn't realize how much had shifted until something went wrong. Not with the car. With me. It happened on a Tuesday-long meeting, passive-aggressive emails, the kind of day that left my shoulders tight and my jaw clenched. By the time I got out of work, the old familiar pressure was back, whispering that I needed to handle it myself, that asking for space or help was weakness. My phone buzzed. "Aaron, you alive?" I stared at the screen longer than necessary. Me barely. A second passed. Then, "Aaron, come by. Not if you want. Not only if you're free. Just come by." I almost didn't. But an hour later, I was knocking on his door. He opened it, took one look at my face and didn't ask a single question. Just stepped aside and pulled me in, his arms solid around me, my forehead pressed into his shoulder. I exhaled hard, felt something in my chest crack open. "Yeah," he murmured. "That bad." We didn't talk about work, didn't dissect the problem. We cooked together instead, simple, messy, music playing quietly in the background. At one point I leaned against the counter, watching him move, and it hit me how strange this felt. Easy. I felt like I belonged there. A few weeks later, someone at work asked if I was seeing anyone. I almost said no out of habit. Instead, I said, "Yeah." The word felt strange, right? When I told Aaron, he smiled but didn't make a big deal of it. Just kissed me and said, "Good." And standing there in his kitchen, I realized something quietly monumental. For the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for something to fail. I was letting it work. The funny thing is, nothing big happened after that. No dramatic confession. No sudden fight. No moment where everything almost fell apart just to prove it was real. Life just kept going. And that's how I knew this was different. A couple months later, I was back at the garage not because anything was wrong, but because Aaron had asked me to bring lunch. I watched him work the same way I had that first day, grease on his hands, focus in his eyes. But this time, when he glanced up and caught me staring, he smiled like he already knew why. "Car behaving?" he asked. "Perfect," I said. "Guess you did a good job." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Told you, once things are aligned, they run smoother." I laughed, but it stuck with me. That night, we sat on his balcony with beers, the city humming below us. My head rested against his shoulder, and for once, my mind wasn't racing ahead to what could go wrong. "You ever think about how close you were to not coming in that first day?" he asked. "All the time," I admitted. I almost ignored the noise. He kissed the top of my head. "You always do." "Yeah," I said softly. Not anymore. And I meant more than the car. Because the truth is, Aaron didn't fix me. He never tried to. He just noticed where I was worn thin and didn't treat it like a flaw. He met me where I was steady and patient and let me decide when to stop compensating. And the day I took my car into that garage, thinking I was just dealing with a mechanical issue, I had no idea I was about to stop ignoring the most important sound of all, the one telling me it was finally okay to slow down, let someone in, and let things work the way they were meant to.